Welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. And today's episode is the holiday season. So we're going to talk about guilt, overstimulation, and then in the midst of all the chaos of what's supposed to be joy, how do we stay true to ourselves? How do we take care of ourselves? Joining me again today is psychotherapist and founder of Lotus Pathways, Shagun Sharma. And you probably remember her from episode 137, Dismantling the Stigmas That Keep Us From Seeking Support. And in that episode, we explored guilt, intergenerational pressures, and the barriers that keep many of us, especially in our South Asian communities, from asking for help. And so today we're continuing the conversation, but through the lens of the holidays. And we thought, who better than Shagun, who does a lot of work around guilt and shame with our community and other community members as well. Why not have her come back and do a little holiday edition for all of us getting ready for that time of year? And I also just want to pause and say that episode 137, it was unbelievable how many downloads, listens, views that particular episode got. And it got me thinking about how that's a message that our community is really trying hard to unlearn the ways that we've learned through our elders and our own community, our histories in managing guilt or lack thereof. So a huge kudos to everyone who listens, who tries their best to be part of the MFU community. Good for you to pick that episode to tune into. The other part to that, though, is send us some feedback. We know you're all listening. We see the numbers. We see the stats. We're so grateful, but it also helps us, our guests, really love finding out what it is that you loved about the episode. Maybe you didn't love about the episode. So your feedback helps us, continuing to thrive and figure out what it is that you're hoping for. So all feedback is good feedback. Do not think that you are sharing something that I wouldn't know. I don't know if you don't share it. So I just wanted to put that out there too, because I had messaged Shagun saying, oh my gosh, this episode got a lot of hits. And that was a cool moment. It should be I'm imagining it was a cool moment for you too. Hey?
Yeah, it was. And honestly, I totally agree. It's such an important discussion to have. And it will be cool for other people to kind of join in and share their experiences, because that's pretty much what that episode was about, was our individual experiences as well, being a person of color, having that guilt from generational trauma and all that stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us how you feel or didn't like or did like always appreciate that. In terms of today's conversation, like we said, we're continuing through the lens of the holidays. And the holidays are supposed to be this time that's joyful, and at the same time, I think it brings a lot of overstimulation, guilt, and a lot of emotional labor. I mean, Shag and I were just having a little conversation about our own experiences leading up to the holidays this year. And so if we're already getting into it ourselves, we can imagine what the rest of you are feeling, especially, I think, women of color, and anyone that's navigating identity or trying to find a safe sense of belonging. I think it's a tricky part of the year for lots. And so we want to be able to leave you guys with some strategies, a lot of validation, and the hope of these kind of episodes are you feel connected and understand you're not the only ones that are experiencing the guilt and the not so joys of this time of year. So anything you want to add before we get started, Shagun?
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like today's topic I was really excited about too, because I feel like, it's something that I feel like everyone can relate to some degree.
I agree. All right. Okay. So let's do like a pre-holiday sort of check-in, because I think it's this in my head, and I think for a lot of people probably it's this pre and then the during and then the post. And,
Yeah.
the pre is interesting because there's a lot of anticipation, pressure, the quote unquote performing joy. And honestly, the stress starts way before the holidays. If you're anyone like me, in the one hot day of the summer here in Canada that we get in August, you're going to the store to buy some corn on the cob for a barbecue. And then, oh, there's gingerbread houses out. And oh, there's like Christmas trees out. And you go to these home goods stores and you have all the Christmas decor already out. And I think that message, thank you capitalism and consumerism, that message starts to spiral a lot of us into this, holy crap, I'm already behind, and it's like the summer. I got to start planning, got to start budgeting, emotional prep, who's coming, who's going, flights, dinners, who's hosting, all the social pressure, all this stuff starts to build. And again, it's supposed to be this most cheerful time. So no wonder by the time the holidays get here, some of us are like, why am I so exhausted? Why am I burning
Yeah.
out? Right. And so I think this is sort of where I would like to ask you, what are some realistic ways that people can prepare emotionally before the holidays hit so they're not running on empty by mid-December, let alone beginning of December? Because if we look at it, we prep our meals, we prep our outfits, we prep our gifts, we do all
Yeah.
that stuff ahead of time. So can we talk about how we can prep our minds as well? So how can we mentally and emotionally prepare for the holidays the same way we plan for all that other stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Like, you know what? I totally agree with you with how quickly our external environment's telling us it's around the corner, like chop chop, start buying things, right? To get ready for the holidays. I think the biggest thing is you need to operate on your own schedule, because as much as you're seeing that reminder around you, you still have to go home. You have to cook, you have to clean, you have to wake up, go to school, go to work, or other duties that you are very much dedicated to. These are all things that are still happening. And so I feel like adding on that stress, especially so early on, I know like closer to the actual holidays, it's almost inevitable, especially because there are other sensory aspects of like shopping that are really overwhelming, but we can definitely get into that in a bit. But yeah, you have to work on your own schedule. Like, it's just not realistic to have the holidays on your mind so early on, especially because your life is still very much dialed up and you have so many other responsibilities.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I love that. And I hear you also say, like, create your schedule, think for what works for you. And part of that is like, okay, what kind of events actually feel nourishing? What kind of parts of this holiday feel like joy? Because we don't all have to do it the same way in all of the ways. So I like that
Yeah.
message. I think that that's the thing to do, is to figure out, okay, what's fitting for me, and not feel guilty that because someone I know does it this way and I don't, that I'm not participating in the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think with that too, different people are going to experience the holidays in very different ways, right? And so to have that expectation that they have is just so unrealistic. And a lot of people do love to give, and
Yeah.
that's great if that's what they want to do. But that's the thing, the holidays is about like joy and celebration and being with one another. And um if one person's definition of the holidays is gift giving and all those things, it can't be yours too, unless you actually really want that to be like your focus too. So yeah, I totally agree. Like, everyone's gonna do it differently.
And like you had brought up a good point too before we started recording, this gift giving, which is the expectation. And something that I really liked you talking about too is like, okay, how can you make it part of the norm to gift with your presents versus actual wrapped up presents? Because not all of us can afford, with the way things are costing nowadays, to buy material gifts. And you
Um,
can limit, especially if you have kids or close family members, that sort of thing. And so how can we separate love and generosity from maternal giving or sorry, material giving?
yeah, and you know what? It's so I feel like that's such an important question, and I feel like in order to answer it, you have to answer it from yourself. I feel like if you do have the
Yeah.
opportunity to revisit your values, not just the values that have been passed down or learned, but I think it's important for you to kind of reevaluate one, where you're at in life, how your experiences up to now do affect your values. And I know that seems like that's a lot of work for the holidays, but I feel like the holidays, it's such a it's the one time of the year where you really do get to take a pause if you can, right? If that's within your means. But for the most part, that's when a pause tends to happen. And so instead of like investing that into, again, spending time buying gifts, spending time arranging, like, this is where we're going to do this and this is where we're going to do that. Take some time and put that energy into yourself. Reevaluate your values, your means, and what you're willing to put into the holidays. Yeah, I think that's probably a really big part of that whole process as well. Yeah.
And one of the things that you said was looking at your own foundation, coming back down to your own values, your own beliefs. And I think another area that maybe we can talk a little bit about is this, okay, when we think of festive stress and the nervous system, a lot
Yeah.
of like the nervous system's kind of the core that allows us to operate with our values or feel confident, make these decisions. And so this
Yeah.
is also an area where we have to learn what overstimulation and social
Hmm.
fatigue, and then there's the FOMO, so that fear of missing out of, well, I
Yeah.
have to go because then if I don't go, then I won't get those brownies that they always make. Like all these kinds of things
Right.
that where this double-edged sword we're living throughout the holidays. So as we said, this is a time that's supposed to be marked as joy, but when many people are already running on empty and the sensory overload and small talk fatigue is another one, disrupted
For sure.
routines, all of that stuff to stay on. And so what happens when we think of all those points? How does that show up in our body when we're feeling that overstimulation during the holidays?
Yeah. And you know what? Even as you're talking about it, it's like I'm thinking about the different things that could be overstimulating during the holidays. Like even going to shop, like now people
Oh,
do online shopping and stuff, but
mhm.
if you're going to a mall, like even being around so many people, the noise and the it's just so stupid.
The
Like even
parking
imagining it,
lots.
the parking lot, so much stress, so much everything. Um, so one of those things is, how do we reduce the stress from there? Another aspect that you brought up was the social aspect. And yes, there's so many components to that where it's you're meeting up with people, whether again it's in the capacity of like a work or school or whatever function that's happening, or a family get together. You're gonna run into some people that maybe you try to avoid all year, and then it's like, oh, I'm in a room with them. So that in itself can be very stimulating. So I think in terms of just breaking all that down, starting with the shopping part. Again, I think there is a part that we need to kind of take a step back, somehow remove that external pressure to like buy gifts, and not just like a couple of gifts, like generally speaking, especially in the day and age we live in now, you're buying multiple gifts for multiple people. Take a step back. I personally find, yeah, like some people find budgeting to be helpful where they're writing down their finances. I feel like taking some of that and also just writing down, the list of people you have to buy your gifts for, writing down what you're thinking about getting them, and then writing down your budget and just like looking at that, observing, and sitting with what emotion comes up as you look at that list too. Because sometimes I feel like we mindlessly kind of spend because we're like, oh, this person wants, I almost said an iPod. Take me
Oh my
back to
gosh.
2000.
Flash from the past. Yeah.
Right,
We all
exactly.
did
That
want
that
that
was the
one
big
time
thing.
ago.
Yeah, exactly. That was the big thing when I was a teenager. But
You know
yeah,
what? They're
just like
probably gonna
whatever.
come back because, like, I noticed over the summer, I went out with my sister, and the
Yeah.
young people had actual cameras at the bars taking
Oh
pictures.
my
So
gosh, yeah.
I'm sure
Digital
iPods are gonna
cameras.
be
Yeah,
back.
they're back. So yeah, if you're getting your whatever a digital camera or an iPod, take a step back and just see how you feel, right? I feel like connecting your emotions with and your reactions to what you're seeing on the page, it really does tell you too, like, I can't manage this. Like I can't spend this much or I can't emotionally invest this much and like set this expectation that I can do this every year, whatever it is. So write it down and actually feel the emotions that are coming up. Um, because, and again, we're going to talk about Blue Monday like in a bit, but when the holidays are done and things are quiet and the bills start coming in, it does lead to a lot of like depressive episodes for so many people too. So I think the big thing is taking those preventative steps before you even get to that point. In terms of the social aspects, this
Hmm.
one's a bit tricky because I feel like this is where guilt really, really comes in. I feel like managing this, yeah, it's tricky because there are certain people where I feel like as we get older or as we just get more comfortable in our skins, our thresholds for some of the things that relatives or friends or certain family members say, it's like this now, right? But it still affects us in such a huge way. It really impacts how we're experiencing the holidays. And that's where assertiveness comes in. And it's very uncomfortable for many people. From my own experiences, dealing with, that one relative that has to make a comment about something, I've taken a very passive route. I think, culturally speaking, we're taught that we shouldn't speak back to our elders, we shouldn't challenge them. Things are a little different now where, now that I feel like I'm more, it's funny that I'm saying rebellious when I say I'm going to stand up for myself, but
I know, but I
it's
get
just,
it. No subtitles needed. Brown girl to brown girl.
yeah,
I
honestly,
get it. I
yeah,
get
it feels
it.
rebellious, but at the end of the day, you're going back home with yourself and your
Yeah.
feelings and your experiences. And so, practicing being, it doesn't have to be passive and it doesn't have to be aggressive or you're yelling back, but even practicing moments of saying, oh, that's an inappropriate comment to make. I didn't appreciate it. I'm just gonna walk away now because I just feel uncomfortable. Yeah, that might stir some stuff up, I feel like realistically, but you're going home with yourself at the end of the day. How do you feel about the comment you made? How do you feel about advocating for yourself? And I feel like that's going to, again, kind of guide you for the next year and the next year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I think that's so
Mhm.
well said. And I think there's got to be a self-help group for our elders because today's elders aren't getting the same kind of responses as yesterday's elders would have. A lot of us are
Yeah,
speaking up, a lot of us are challenging some of these beliefs and ways and even rituals too that would have
for
never
sure.
happened, the generations before. But at the same time, we're evolving, and I don't think there's a way to cap that or stop that. If it's out of respect, if it's out of the goodness of our heart, and if it's, feels like the good and right thing, there is a kind way to come out and do that. Maybe not the
Mhm.
first time, but maybe by the second time, and I
Yeah,
think that if we're in a space where there's other people around, this is where like that the emotional labor of like standing up for yourself comes in. And when you have other people around you that can also speak up and support, I think that's very, very powerful and helpful too. So you don't look like
mhm.
the one person in the room that everyone else is, they're agreeing with you, but then they're letting you be the one that's taking the fall or
Yeah,
whatnot. So there
yeah,
are ways that we can sort of, with a relative cousin say, okay, if uncle says that this year, like, can the three of us, make a face or say something or what? There's creative ways that we can respond to it without feeling like it's all on us. But it's if it
absolutely.
feels like it's crappy to keep hearing, then I think I agree. I think it's worth saying something. 100% would agree.
Yeah.
Like, what about, some of what I hear you saying too is what happens to our sense of self when we go, whether we go home or home comes to us, but we're with our family
Mm.
members and we feel like we're 16 again. Like I think there's sometimes that regression and roles take part, and then that guilt sort of like, I'm a grown ass woman who's
Right.
working this big job that they're giving me these responsibilities, but then I go home and I cave when my uncle says this or my aunt says that. What's the thing to
Yeah.
say or do to that?
Yeah, and it's so funny because even as like a therapist that processes this and explores this, I go through them myself. Like it's
Yeah.
something that can be so it's funny because I feel like in those moments, that's a moment of being triggered, right? You feel like you're being pulled back into these traumatic instances, and how do you react? Your body's gonna react the way that it did when you were younger. Your
Yes.
heart's gonna race a bit, your hands might sweat, and then it just feels like you're back in that space, right? A good book for that is Body Keeps the Score. Like even looking at those like little traumas and little triggers that happen in those moments. I think a really big part before entering environments where you know, hey, it is very likely I'm going to be triggered here, being around certain people. Um, if you have the means, talk to a therapist. If you don't have the means and you need support that is more accessible, looking at distress lines, looking at groups around you. I feel like during the holidays there are like more supports that are in place. Thankfully, and these are just from my observations in the past few years, because when I was younger, those were not things that
Yeah.
were easily accessible at all. Um, and another thing is, again, doing some coping and grounding work. So, with the coping, writing down a list of maybe some of the responses that you might want to have versus what you might have. So, for example, Uncle's going to say this thing because he always says it every time I see him. Usually, how I react, I laugh because I feel awkward. So I just start laughing. Maybe this year, what I want to do is I just want to take a really deep breath and say, okay, I just need to be excused. And then take myself to the washroom or a quiet place and do some grounding techniques. Or I want to talk to mom, and hopefully mom will talk to uncle about, what they should say and what they shouldn't say. I feel like you brought up such a good point too, is like, one, yes, you can be your biggest self advocate, and I think that's so important. But sometimes you just need that support too, right?
Yeah.
So work on your primary intervention plans. Look at different supports from different people. Look at environments that you can go to just do those grounding and coping mechanisms. But as a primary intervention plan, maybe write down some of these things so you kind of have them in practice before you actually practice them in field.
Perfect. And I think even to just touch on like physical symptoms, when our nervous system activates our fight, flight, fawn responses,
Yes.
sometimes signs can include like irritability, zoning out, jaw tension, um, your stomach doesn't feel great, maybe you're sweating a little bit. All these sorts of things that in a little bit we're going to talk about lead to the drinking part that, like I think let's put a pin in, we'll come back to. But how can we notice some of these early signals that maybe we're starting to get closer to that going to be running on empty place? So is
Mhm.
there a way that we can do body scans or check-ins, and just what does that level of stress do for my body? How can I be a good team player to my body? Do you have suggestions of what we can look for in our body that when these sorts of stressful situations happen?
For sure. So
Yeah.
I would say even prior to the social engagement or whatever you might be attending, take some time to think about, when I think nervousness, what are 5 to 10 physical sensations that I experience when I'm feeling blank. So when I'm feeling hangry, my heart's racing, my hands are sweating. Um, it's like my mind is just like, it's like consistently ruminating, and that's just making me feel hotter. So some of these are the symptoms that are related to anger for me. So when I have these written out, I'm seeing them, I'm going to identify, okay, these symptoms are coming up, I feel like I'm feeling angry. And that can also be for sadness, that could be for discomfort. I think when you're actually in the environment that you're about to attend, my whole thing is we need to do a little bit more to feel a little like less of that. So for example, maybe either having a check-in person, like someone coming in and you've already discussed with them previous, like, hey, this is going to be a hard environment. Can you just come to me every hour or whatever and just check in? If you don't have that, some people feel really uncomfortable expressing that that's even an experience that they feel around their family, right? I think that's a whole set of its stigma with like how you should be around family. Have it on your phone, a timer. Every hour it just goes off and you're like, I'm gonna go to the washroom for a minute and just like do those grounding techniques, do a body scan, do a check-in. I feel like those are ways to keep yourself accountable. And I feel like that is really important during the holidays because you want to take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
that's not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too, right?
Yeah.
So those are two things that I would suggest either before or during.
I think we find ourselves getting sick a lot during the holidays, calling in sick, we're physically sick, and body burnout is a thing. And I think if during that time we are finding ourselves getting run down with a cold or something, that's a huge sign that we're not slowing down and checking in with our body and our mind when it comes to the things going on at work, things going on at home. It's not only because it's cold outside, and that's not the only
Yeah,
reason, or as our moms would say, the wind touched the back of our neck and now we have a flu. And that's how I grew
right.
up learning, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's lots of reasons outside of the cold environment and why we're getting sick. And so I encourage us to pay attention. And if you do flu shots and stuff, that's one thing, but just pay attention to the things that we're putting in our body and the stressors that we're allowing in that are impacting. Oh, great, now I gotta call in sick. I think sometimes it's like I don't even have a cold, but it's too many of those social interactions. Like that can be very, very tiring for people. And I think a lot more
Hmm.
people are introverts, is that how you say it, than extroverts. And I think some of us like to think we're extroverts, but we actually prefer to have that downtime to just chill and whatnot. So
For
allow
sure.
those things, right? Otherwise that stress eats us up.
Uh-huh.
So
And I feel like
yeah.
that's a really good point too with introverts and extroverts. First of all, yeah, like it's a scale. There's different types of introverts, there's different types of extroverts. But regardless, like even looking at your battery, right? Like if you're an introvert, you're operating in a world that's built for extroverts, right?
Yeah.
And you're in a situation where you're really going to be surrounded by big stimuli. So again, like really kind of taking that step back and understanding what this holiday season is going to mean for you is so important.
Well said. And maybe
Mhm.
throughout more examples of managing our nervous system will come out. I'm wondering if we can move to safety. So I'm thinking in particularly about our LGBTQ plus 2SL, and I'm very sorry if I didn't say that right. If anyone wants to correct me, please do, so that moving forward I do say it right. Our marginalized communities are people that are looking for safe belonging, and this is the area where I want to talk about things like body image, fertility, all these sorts of grief related, let alone identity related parts that we bring to the table at these dinners. And then there's certain people that choose to pick out of every kind of conversation to have those parts of us. And
Yeah,
so for our marginalized communities like the LGBTQ plus 2SL, and again, if I said it wrong, please tell me, community, the holidays can bring up mixed emotions, this whole joy and connection for some, or anxiety for a lot, alienation. Family gatherings may mean code switching for a lot of people, concealing parts of
yeah,
yourself. So all of that builds. And so holidays are also a reminder that family doesn't have to be the people that we share blood with. Like family can be people that want to see us fully as well. And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
my question for you is, for the LGBTQ plus community, what are some ways people can feel safe when they're entering spaces that maybe aren't actually fully safe or affirming?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? It's so complicated because, we're looking at identity as a piece, but then, every family has its own like set of like history and traumas and relationships. I think the biggest thing is you're gonna know your family the best, right? You're gonna know what your triggers may look like. You're gonna know, certain people that you're really not safe around, whether that's honestly, emotionally, mentally, or even physically. I would say, I feel like there's this thing called toxic loyalty where we feel, yeah, where we feel like we have to present ourselves to our families and show up the way that they're going to need because it's family and we need to do absolutely everything we can for them, but at the end of the day you're the one that's getting hurt too, right? I feel like a big part of this conversation is, as you said, um, chosen family is a thing. If you feel like maybe this year or, next year or whatever you're ready for, if you're not able to show up for your family the way that you have been, or show up for the expectations that they're putting on you, not asking, not like request, like just full on, you have to be there. It is going to be your own journey to reassess and reevaluate how it's going to impact you and what you would rather do instead. Um, if you're in a position where you have, friends or chosen family, different community resources, again, looking at us too, we're from like very like different provinces as well. Like we're going to have different types of resources. If you're able to find places that you feel safe, I would just say invite yourself to really explore the benefits of maybe choosing an alternative, much more safer space, rather than kind of going into that toxic loyalty and showing up for people that are causing you harm in your life. Again, like I'm in a position, easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like I think the biggest thing is it's going to start with reevaluating and confronting hard truths.
Hmm.
Um, but when you're actually in the space and you know what, you feel like you're not ready to kind of take the leap and maybe change the way um, you see the holidays. When you're in the space, I would say almost do a safety check, right? Have some friends that might be texting you throughout the event. Again, if that's not the case, call like crisis lines. Have like, I guess like being around people that again are in your definition safe, rather than maybe spending that one-on-one time with someone that you know is going to hurt you in some capacity.
Hmm.
Um, and honestly, you don't have to be there for the whole event. I know for some
Yeah.
people, again, it's like, no, you have to be here for dinner. You have to be here for the gifts. You have to, no. If you're not comfortable, set your boundaries where you can set them and where you're comfortable setting them.
Yeah, like if anyone needs permission, because I don't know anyone out there that feels okay doing this on their own, but we give you permission to plan an exit strategy. Like it is
Yes, yeah.
okay to leave. And I think that's a huge reminder that yeah, we don't have to stay for the whole time. We can have lots of reasons, and I think that ahead of time. And I also appreciate what you're saying, maybe one person to text, like a text buddy or someone at the table. And I think a other part to this too is that, like I said earlier, that emotional labor to always self-defend. So I know there are good friends, good coworkers, good family members out there that can help create this safe environment so that the most vulnerable person isn't having to fight off everyone and everything. So I
Yeah.
think it's all of our job to do what we can and should to create this inclusive, safe space for our family, our friends, and maybe all of the aunties and uncles don't have the capacity, or all the relatives, but there are few in there that I truly believe do get it and can be at the table, that can also speak up and step up. Like, it's never going to be a comfortable conversation, but imagine what it's like for the person that's feeling singled out. Not all of
Absolutely.
us have been there, right? We've always wanted to have someone to say something for us in that
Yeah.
moment. So like, be that person that you've all wanted, where you can say, not now, this isn't
Yeah.
what we're going to talk about right now, this is not the right time, this isn't the forum, whatever it is. If you are a comedian and sense of humor is your thing, use that to
Yeah.
distract, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes going toe to toe isn't the way, but the truth of the matter is, like, anyone that we love that is in this vulnerable position deserves us to say or do something in that moment.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, the reality is, empathy is only going to take you so far, right? Like, you need action, especially when you're empathizing with someone that is being berated or picked on or isolated, outcasted, whatever it might be. Yes, like, it's good for you to empathize and show your support, but that support needs to come into action, and change does need to happen. Um, so I totally agree with what you're saying here.
I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna ask you, are there people always mean well, but they miss the points? So, and as we're saying, they ask these invasive questions, or don't get our pronouns correct, all these sorts of things. So, should there be topics that are just off the table? Should there be things that we should really think about not bringing up when we're at a work gathering, a social gathering, a family gathering, whatever it may be?
Yeah. You know, I feel like as much as we want to create some guidelines with that and within our families, realistically, there's always going to be the one person that's going to say
Yeah.
something. Because if they feel like it's a joke, they're going to feel like they're going to be like, "Whoa, it was just a joke." Like, everyone's just like, coming at me, right? But I feel like in terms of the way that we're responding, again, maybe because I come from a very different perspective on these topics, going through my own types of hardships, right? I feel like if someone is making those jokes, I don't think it's like anything's off the table with how you respond, as long as, again, like, you want to make sure you're representing yourself in the way that, again, when you go home, you're going to feel like, okay, I'm glad I said it like this or did it like this. So it can be a quick correction. It could be a quick, or someone else correcting, or like having a discussion, or calling them out and just being like, what if it was a joke? Like, what part of it does it feel like a joke for you, right?
Mm.
Realistically, for some people, you're only seeing these family members like in that time of the year. So if they're choosing to use that opportunity to like come up with their own like opinion that's not okay for me, it's like, well, okay, if they're saying it, then this is my time also to respond to it. um
I really
but
like that.
yeah, again, you need to still take care of you, and everyone's going to be really different with how their level of comfort with conflict and responding. um but at the end of the day, you have to respect yourself, and you have to respect how you're going to feel and respond. But I'm like, listen, if they're saying this, it's inappropriate, and they chose this time to say it. So use your opportunity to respond back if that's what you would like to do.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think that I'm going to keep that in like my front pocket as well, because I think there's so many times that advice can be utilized outside of the holidays too, where you're like,
Yeah.
really? Like, you could have asked me anything in the world, and we will no longer have Christmas dinners in our house with friends and family mix, because the last one, it was ridiculous. It's like people decide to bring up the worst thing possible and ask the one person that they know is going to have a different response back. And then, they go around the Christmas dinner going to other people being like, "Oh, she's just so angry," or, "Oh, she's so
Yeah.
worked up. I was
Yeah.
just asking." And so I think you're absolutely right. And I have so much respect for that woman that spoke up, that was targeted at my house for the Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
and was like, "You asked? I'm going to now answer you asked me my opinion. I didn't give it. You
Absolutely.
invited me, and here's what I'll say. And so I think sometimes we just, like you said, we try to be empathetic, we try to be understanding, but you can only take so much as well, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
so good point. And I think, we're
Yeah.
talking about our LGBTQ plus 2SL community, but I think a lot of these questions also are fitting for people that are dealing with like body image issues. You're having to get dressed. People sometimes have certain dress codes or dress attire to these events, and often it is dress up.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, it's just not the time of year that they want to be dressing up, whatever their reason being. And then there's always that person that brings up body weight or body image related stuff. And then,
Yeah.
I think the other people, or the part of the community, is people struggling with fertility. It's like, oh, how come you guys haven't had kids yet? Or when are you going to have kids? And some people have chosen that that's not their path either. So
Yeah.
I think there's all these
Yeah.
different paths these days that aren't, the two that we were given eons ago. And so for people struggling with body image, for people that are going through maybe fertility struggles or are choosing to not have kids, or someone that's showing up and is in their 30s, a brown woman and not married, like that's a
Yeah.
huge conversation that a lot of family members love to point out as well. And there's lots of reasons why someone might not be in a relationship or choosing not to share who they're in a relationship with. So
Right. Yeah.
I think like we have these expectations in our community about what your career should be, what, where you should be with marriage and all these kinds of things. And
Yeah.
that's not the path for everyone. So anything additional you would add in sort of what I've listed, and people that are showing up with all sorts of stuff and things that they're bringing to the table with them?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Like, this is definitely everything that you're listing here too. I've experienced, I feel like my friends have experienced it, my other family members. It's it's something that I feel like no matter how prepared you are and how again assertive you are and how much you stand up for yourself, I think like realistically there's a part of you that it's gonna hurt, right? So my thing is, yes, stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself. I think we spoke about this in the last podcast, but if someone is willing to make you feel uncomfortable, challenge them. If they feel uncomfortable with your challenge, right? Or how you want to respond. By saying, like, some examples are, listen, that's an extremely inappropriate thing to say. I'm not here and to comment on the way that you look or whatever it might be, because that's not something that I know about you, right? Like, I don't know what you're going through. So please do not comment on, my appearance or, what I'm going through with my fertility or whatever it might be. Um, Again, like it's up to you how you want to phrase it and who the person is and how you want to communicate. I bet you right now people are gonna be like, "Oh no, I didn't mean anything by it." Like
Yeah.
that tends to be the response I find. It's like, "Oh, they took it so
Yeah.
seriously." It's like, well, I mean, yeah. But I think for me personally, the biggest thing is the way that you're gonna react to yourself reacting. You need to it's like the way that, for example, a friend of yours just went through this. How would you address this friend? How would you nurture them, make sure they're okay, tend to them? What would you say to them? For me personally, what works is telling myself, like, these people, like whoever that might be, they're operating from their experiences and they've normalized things that are not appropriate. Like, I find that, like, for me, especially with like my South Asian women relatives, weight, looks, appearance, those are things that really, yeah, and again, fertility, all those things. But those are things that have always been challenged, have always been criticized and questioned. So it's so like normal for them to just be like, oh, like, hey, you look like you gained weight.
Yeah.
Because that's just something that's so like normal and like their
Mm-hmm.
communication, right? So reminding yourself that this is something that's coming from them. It could be a projection, it could be something that's normalized but needs to change. What I know is what I'm going through. What I know is that at the end of the day, I have me. to like take care of me. And this person is also not representing everyone in the room, right?
Totally.
Just because they're saying this thing, that doesn't mean this person's going to think that, or that person's going to think that, or say this to you. So again, biggest thing is these triggers unfortunately will happen.
Yeah.
And if you're very fortunate, they may not, but I feel like we all get some like version of that. If it does happen, tend to yourself the way your favorite person would tend to you, because that's the most important part, is like you're okay.
I really like what you said, and if I can add, maybe it's a PSA to brown girls and boys and people out there. Like, a lot of you are in the cycle breaking era, and
Yes.
I think you're doing something for the first time that these relatives have never known even to imagine is possible or carry in action. So if you are
Mm,
someone at a job and hate it, that's because you are learning that you can hate your place of work and want to be somewhere
right.
else. If you are
Mm,
someone that isn't in a relationship, isn't married, that's because you're learning that that's not the be all end all, and that's not the place you have to be. You can get married whenever you want if you choose that. If you're someone that is just in a slump and thinks, I should be happy right now because what do I have to be upset about? That's because you're also learning that you're in this era where you can feel multiple emotions and they can all be accurate. And I want and hope that this sits with so many of you out there, because I think these cycle breaking moments are great, but I think they're also causing a lot of grief because there's no one paving the way. People are sort of doing this for the first time on their own. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I feel like because you may be in that position of doing it, not everyone in your, and like people that you would normally identify with, they may not be in that place as you too. So sometimes it feels very isolating that you're the only
Yes.
one doing it. And honestly, for me, like that also increases the guilt, right? Of like, oh man, like maybe I am changing things that I shouldn't be changing. But no, that guilt, I think, is also a little bit of an anxiety narrative. And again, like I feel like, as you said, like it is kind of breaking or just redefining like traditions and what it means to be, in the position that you are, and just like
Yeah.
representing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right about the isolation part, and I think well said. And I think sometimes some of these, moments of overstimulation or oh my gosh, lead to the next place, which is, when you're in this social pressure, there's this drinking and then sometimes this avoidance. So I
Mm,
think there's this like blurred line in the holidays between what's celebration and what's coping. And there's drinking, there's overworking, there's staying quote unquote busy. And a lot of these often I feel mask some of this emotional avoidance of like what's really maybe going on for me. And so by choosing, let's say, not to drink, that can bring its own layer of awkwardness because now you have to be like, oh, no, thanks, I'm not drinking. And then people are like, oh, you think you're
yeah.
better than me. And then when you're surrounded by coworkers or in the culture of maybe a workplace that's what you do. And then,
Right.
there's the South Asians, like there's the respect. If I'm coming to your house for a Christmas party, you should have alcohol to serve me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then, well, if I say no, that's also disrespectful. There's like these weird nuances that we've created as a community that on the surface look like respect, but I think underneath are really just covering up alcoholism on many levels. And I think we get stuck on should I not be drinking? Is it okay for me not to drink? And some people just avoid going out because they don't want to be mulled over and over asked, do you want to have a drink? Do you want to have a drink? It's like, you guys,
Yeah.
I'll be fun still, don't worry. And so I just want to like touch on that and talk about some things that people can do for themselves when they're in that do I drink, do I not drink place. So maybe we can start with like what happens when drinking becomes less about joy and more about numbing. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So starting with using it as a means of numbing. I feel like there's adaptive ways of coping and there's maladaptive ways of coping.
Yeah.
We're using alcohol as the example, but now we know things like vaping and like legal and
Weed.
illegal
Yeah.
drugs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is if you feel like you need to participate, like excessively using any of those things, you already know that you're in a space where you're not safe because you're trying to like protect yourself by using these things to, yeah, essentially numb yourself out, right? So I think the big thing, sometimes you don't really notice until you're at that point where you're like, oh no, I've drank way too much, and the whole like dynamic with your space changes. I feel like a big part of that is reassessing. One thing that I've been seeing a lot is get curious, not serious.
Ooh.
So like yeah, like get curious, but last year I found that, at work I drank like way too much and I didn't mean to. I didn't want to. I hated how I was feeling. So like instead of like getting super serious and shaming yourself and be like, don't do that this year, get curious. Why did I do that? Why did it get to that point? And the reason why I'm looking at a little bit more of reflection rather than being preventative, like we've discussed some of the coping mechanisms with protecting yourself, your feelings, but it's again something like alcohol or whatever you're using. It's kind of a slippery slope, and you don't
Yeah.
realize it until it's too late. So try to be reflective on it
I like that.
when you're
Yeah.
going to space. Yeah, like use those coping mechanisms that we've discussed here. In terms of expectations, especially when it comes to alcohol,
Yeah.
um, and I find that especially as a woman, if you're not drinking, it's like, oh, you must be pregnant.
Oh, yes.
It's like the most. It gets me so annoyed.
That's the only
Um,
reason why, totally.
yeah,
Like, oh
yeah,
gosh.
it's so
Yes.
silly. I think a big thing is be authentic to yourself. If you're not drinking, you know why you're not drinking. Like you don't have to share it. You could share if you want to while you're not. But the way that another person reacts to you not drinking is not your responsibility. Um, they're operating from their own history, their own background, their own culture, their own expectations, and their
Yeah.
own like challenges and issues that leads to them being like, no, you have to drink. It's like, no, I don't. I don't have to do anything I don't want to. So remember that you are one person in the dynamic between you and another person or a group of people. Um, and they're responsible with how they're going to react or like act around you. So be authentic to yourself. If you don't want to drink, if you don't want to do anything that's being offered, say no. Again, peer pressure, right? Like we've learned this for
Yeah.
so many years. Put it to practice. Like don't be peer pressured into doing something that you don't want to. If that guilt comes up, interact with it. Like talk to it, ask it why it's coming up, what you can do to help it that, doesn't compromise what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the big thing is tend to yourself again in those moments.
And I really do love that you talked about reflect because that is the best way to be preventative as well. It's history repeats itself, so it's already happened last year, and so it is a good thing to sort of go back and say, okay, or at the last big, social event, how was that for me and that sort of thing. And here too, like domestic violence is such a big part and connected to when we use alcohol or other suppressants and whatnot. And I think that for people that are stressed about themselves or their partner and how things end up happening, you're supposed to be a wonderful Christmas party or New Year's party and it turns into something not. I do encourage people to be realistic with themselves too, of like what is the interaction between me and my household members, and do we need safety
Yeah.
planning, or you know there should always be one sober caregiver, right? If you have kids, just in case something like an emergency or what happens, are the kids cared for? Like, just, I think doing the best planning as possible so that you're not set up and nothing extreme happens and we're not, looking at numbers of car accidents and these sorts of things. Like, we all have a responsibility and we all
Agreed.
should be allowed to let loose and have a good time. But I think we have to really understand, and I feel like I'm going to sound like a gambling ad, but like knowing our limit,
Yeah.
and what happens when I am not in my limit. And I think for me that I'm entering 10 months of not smoking weed. And I think for me, summer was something I had to plan for. And now I'm also doing my own work planning for the Christmas season because more
Right.
people to be around and whatnot. And my realistic plan was, to be honest, not being around people that smoked weed. Like I had to
Yeah.
stop being around that because I know, especially in the beginning, as I was rewiring things, that was difficult for me. And I think even not listening to certain music, things that connect us. So I think sometimes we think, oh, yeah, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And really hope you will be. But do you have clear, plans? Have you actually been fully reflecting and thinking about,
Yeah.
okay, like let's work backwards from I'll be fine. And the thing that we struggle a lot with, whether it's the South Asian community or other communities, is what we talked about in the episode with you, is asking for help, right? Like we're not good
Yeah.
at doing that. So I think sometimes like social expectations, as we talked about, can reinforce this pattern.
For sure.
Drinking is connection, going out smoking a cigar, weed, whatever it is connection. So, but you
Mm.
talked about too that peer pressure and that discomfort in disguise as well. So, and then what about the flip side, like people who withdraw entirely? As a way of like, okay, avoidance is a way to self-protect, and that's fine, but where do they know the difference between what's isolation and not? So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically, I guess we would be talking about people that do need like that space and time away from others. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I think that even goes back to the whole like conversation about introvert, extrovert, like just a whole other bunch of other situations, right? The expectation can't be, and you know what, it often is that you're going to show up 100% of the time, the entire time. And I think that that is where guilt comes up the most, which is, it's funny because the more those expectations are put onto someone that needs their own time and space, the more they're probably going to withdraw and not want to communicate at all because they're avoiding that discomfort with that confrontation, right? I do feel like okay, so we've been talking a lot about like what we can do if we're going through it, but if you're someone that is that person that's like, no, I want my family with me the entire time, and no, like the expectation is we are gonna all wake up at the same time and open presents, and it doesn't matter, like I don't care how tired you are, whatever. It is really important for you to kind of check in with your own expectations here too, right? Some people are very open with, what they're experiencing, what they're going through. And like just as much as they're not pushing that expectation of you to like, no, like we shouldn't open presents together anymore at all. Like everyone should just do it separately in their rooms. That's not an expectation that they're wanting to put on you. So you can't expect the same, right? Um, I know traditions are traditions, but traditions do change, right? It's healthy and everything. And so if we're people that often withdraw to be a part of things, yeah, like include them, but ask them how they want to be included, what capacity they're open to be included with, or what they feel like they can do in order
Yeah.
to celebrate. Create that space for people, right? And for the person that is the person that withdraws, again, your situation, there's so many reasons to withdraw. Again, we let it introvert, extrovert, but then there's so many other things. People that are very sensitive to stimuli,
Yeah.
people that are in situations where there are challenges happening within the household. I think the big thing is one, if you're able to, yeah, like express what you need in those circumstances. But unfortunately, I think often we can't do that because of like certain situations. I feel like if you're not able to express what you need to express to yourself what you need. It might increase other feelings like guilt. It might increase like feelings of more isolation. But look into those feelings and respect and validate them individually, whatever feelings
Mm.
coming up, and look at how we can kind of support ourselves through those emotions and how to navigate ourselves with it. Something like guilt, I think this one like is super relatable. Being in a house with like a whole bunch of people. For me personally, I went from Christmas being the five of us, like me and my siblings and my parents, getting gifts from Dollarama because we couldn't afford like fancy gifts, and we were okay with that, right? It was never a bad thing. To now being married into a family that really celebrates Christmas, and it's usually like a 20 plus person affair, and it's like so many people. I need my space because I'm just like I need time away from all of this, right?
Yeah.
But I feel guilt because I'm like, oh no, am I like taking my partner away from like people? Because again, he feels guilty if he lets me go alone to my
Yeah.
own space.
Yeah.
Um, so being really realistic with what I can give and what I can't give. And if people are having issues with that or concerns, let them come to you and hopefully they can create that space for you. But if they can't, again, it's all about reassessing what your definition of the holidays are going to look like moving forward.
I really love that you touched on this, like being with a partner. And I think that's such a good point. Whether it's an interracial relationship or
Mhm.
newlyweds and then everyone in between, it's like your family did it different than their family. And now you two are together. And there are these expectations maybe of we have to be together on Christmas Eve or this day, but then maybe your partner's family also does something those dates. So how do you dial the noise down in a
Mhm.
couple or in a relationship and figure that stuff out together without having a divorce before the end of the
Right.
holidays? Because it's
Yeah, honestly, right? Like thankfully I feel like a privileged position where my partner is like beyond understanding with everything that we do. I think the big thing is you have to set your boundaries, you have to set your expectations with your partner prior to going into these different events. In situations where your partner is less understanding, it is important to have a discussion about this before hopping into the holidays. And we're talking about like Christmas, New Year's, and all those things, but other holidays too. Like for us, the volley just went by, right?
yeah.
And the expectation for that is so different from so many perspectives, honestly. But you need to have that conversation with your partner before you're expected to just perform, right? Like in that
Yeah.
setting. Um, Honestly, I would encourage, again, what's in your means, what's not in your means. One, talking to a third party. That could be a friend, that could be a family member, that could be a religious figure for some people. And for others, it could be a couples therapist or a counselor, right? If you feel like you can navigate it between each other, try to bring someone in that can maybe provide a neutral stance on it and like kind of help guide. Again, not always easy for everyone, especially if you're super private, but I feel like those things honestly do affect your relationship. As you said, like, hey, some people, like, it could be reasons that kind of accumulate into something way bigger, even
Yeah.
if it's outside of the holidays, right? Because you're really trying to establish like a healthy relationship. So I feel like that is something that's really important to do before you're in it.
Yeah. I think it definitely for some of our couples in our community in particular, these are things that you don't even think about beforehand or until you really get there. And I think maybe the first year you surfacely figure it out or the first event, but they are going to continue to come. And I also suggest like find a way, like what is the best way to communicate together? What's your style? What's your partner's style? And what's something that
Um,
you guys can do a mashup with so that maybe you don't leave the situation feeling like it's a win-win for both, but
yeah.
what's the best possible outcome out of this situation so that
Hmm.
we can kind of come to a place where we're working through it. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely part of the stress of the holidays is managing the in-laws and those things for a lot of people more so of what's happening. And I think each partner has to figure out how to step up and, speak to their own family as well. Like I can't
Yes.
expect my
Yeah.
husband to have this conversation with my parents, as he obviously couldn't expect me to with his, but we each have to take our own families on as well and say, okay, hold on a second, how do we figure this out? It's wonderful that we're all fighting over how much we want to hang out with each other, but then when we get together, all we do is hate on each other, right? So it's like always so funny when we're like, we're all fighting over wanting to actually spend time together.
Oh my
So why
gosh,
can't we make it feel like that when we all get together? But I don't know. We're all complicated. A couple more things before we go to the post, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to touch on this whole Secret Santa thing. So sometimes these subtle, I would say, microaggressions of festive inclusion. So a lot of places of work offer some kind of festive thing, Secret Santa, or a way to team build and whatnot. And I think it's always well intended and everyone means well. So that's not the issue here. But I think sometimes for people of color and maybe even immigrants, like you're just entering this North American, I was going to say issue, but holiday season. And so now you're doing a Secret Santa, and maybe you're born raised here, but the holidays aren't really, Christmas kind of time isn't really your thing, but you take part in the surface way. There's all these sorts of things that happen. But sometimes when we do Secret Santa, it's like this tokenism that's masked as inclusion, and there's these cultural assumptions. And I think for a lot of people of color, there's this code switching fatigue. So Secret Santa gifts, there's potlucks, these kinds of things, cultural appreciation gestures, but they kind of come from good intentions, but miss the mark. So I'll give you an example between myself and other people I've talked to over the years. We'll open up our Secret Santa gifts and they're literally meant to be connected to our ethnicity. So one last year, someone I knew got masala tea, and we laughed about these are ingredients that we have sitting in our kitchen because our moms stack our kitchen with lachi and cloves and all that. But someone's trying to connect with you, and sometimes it's like, bro, I'll take that vanilla candle too, or that Tim Hortons gift card. Like, why does it? You have no context about the person's culture. One time I got a bracelet and it was like the scripture was, I don't know, in like a different language. It wasn't, I can't even read Punjabi, let alone I knew it wasn't in Punjabi. And I was like, okay, cool. Thank you. This is very intimate. And now I have to be grateful and thankful. But is there a way we can talk about this inclusivity in the workplace as well, where we're not getting so deep into someone's, what we think is their culture or how they identify? And these are all these well-meaning gestures, but there's this microaggression, this underlying piece of like, this doesn't feel right. Why am I taking masala tea from you? And it stings. It stings. And then you're like, do I say something? Now I'm the bad guy if I don't, and I didn't say thank you enough and whatnot. So how can we sort of navigate this better in the workplace?
Yeah, okay. Like that. It's so funny to me that it's like you chose this time to be like culturally inclusive and like it's
also, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, I would
Also,
honestly,
yes.
it's so, and I'll be honest, like I myself have not experienced that, right? And so it's hopefully like I can share my thoughts and my opinion on it, but it's something that I myself have not gone through. I've had other forms of that in different spaces, but I would say, again, like it's okay to have an uncomfortable conversation if that's something that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? Easier said than done from my perspective for the reason I just shared. But I feel like it is a way for you to, again, like we talked about breaking certain expectations and traditions in our own family units. I feel like unfortunately, but fortunately, it's a double-edged sword where we might have to do that in places of work too. Where we might have to be like, hey, I'm kind of curious, like, why did you get me this gift? And you know what? Maybe they might be like, oh, like I just saw it and I thought it was really cool and I thought of you. What? Oh, well, what made you think of, like, you know what I mean? So just like, again, getting like kind of curious with that, and then maybe expressing like, okay, well, I just want to let you know from my point of view, this is how it came off, right? Some people might have the openness to accept how I made you feel. And hopefully that is a big learning moment for them, right? I personally, and I'll be honest, I really do love advocating and teaching my culture to people. But man, when I have to like explain something like that and like
Yeah.
be the teacher in every situation, it's exhausting, right?
Yeah. It's
But
always just like you
honestly,
got to just be grateful, or I didn't mean it that way. Why are you taking that way? And you're like,
yeah, it's the
because you're
guilt.
flattening my identity. You're
Yeah,
deciding that this inclusion is inclusion, but it's actually becoming tokenism of something that's really not
yeah.
personalized,
And I
but
feel
you
like that's
decided
important to
it.
teach. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do feel like that's
Yeah.
important to teach. I feel like that is important to share, especially because you know what? This person could be like the most awesome, nice, kind person, and their intentions were good, but it's going to affect your relationship with this person, right? When it comes down to it,
Yeah.
I think that it's definitely very fair for you to have that conversation and create that dialogue, in a more systematic way, like moving forward. Maybe talking to whoever organizes it and say, hey, listen, like I had some concerns last year. I didn't really like my experience. Maybe this time it's just appropriate for us to list down the things that we want, or like categorize things that we would need because, yeah. But I would say express yourself, talk about it. It's
Yeah.
like the change is going to have to start somewhere. And unfortunately, but fortunately, it depends on how you see it. It may have to start with you.
Yeah. This one particular example of this woman from last year, what was really cool was that there ended up being another South Asian person at this gift exchange that totally picked up on it and said something. And
Yeah.
the woman, and it was a white woman that gave the masala tea, she was sitting there, and to her credit, she outed herself too. She's like, okay, it was me, I did it. And there
Yeah.
was like a really nice, at least from me being the person listening to the story, maybe not for the person like that got the gift in the moment, but I think it was a good start to like an exchange of,
Yeah.
the white chick was like, okay, I'm curious, like it wasn't meant this way, but tell me about it. And I love that don't be serious, be curious kind of thing. And then the other South Asian woman was able to help her understand, like, again, like, yeah, you're flattening the identity, you're choosing that,
Yes.
you're deciding that this is how this person identifies, and you're putting them in a pigeonhole because that's what she said to, reminded me of this person, right? So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so good that you yourself didn't have to speak up, because like we talked about emotional labor of like, um now I have to explain it or whatever. And so it was nice to have someone else at the table that
Yeah.
said, okay, that's odd and here's why.
Yeah.
And
And also
good
that
good for
kind of
that
goes back
girl to be
to,
like,
yeah, I was just gonna say that goes back to the earlier conversation we had too about like as family members, like we can interject, right? Like if we're seeing an issue, like empathy is one thing, but taking action is another. So it's
holy
great that that
yes.
person was just like, that's kind of weird. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I was same thing. I was like, oh man, I hope that kind of a person sits at the table with me every time.
I know.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's wrap up with post holiday. So we've gone through the holidays, we've prepared, we've reflected, but now no one's hanging around. We're all back to work. It's reality. We're getting the bills. And also it's the new year, and now I feel bad because I didn't follow through with the goals I was supposed to follow through with. And maybe I'm reflecting back and thinking, oh, the year wasn't great. All these sorts of things. Maybe I was experiencing grief during the holiday season and it's carried through.
Yeah.
All these sorts of things that lead to a dark January for many people. And so I just want to start with like, why do we feel so drained after the holidays? And is there something we can be doing to prepare for that post holiday kind of, maybe like a reset, or however we want to word it,
Yeah.
recovery?
For sure. So there's so many reasons, right? And I think like it's hard not to reflect on it on a personal level, but also like in a professional level, because honestly, as a therapist, we do see a little bit of a gap between the like pretty much the month of January. Like a lot of clients just don't come in. And then February we see an intake. I mean, sorry, an uptake of it. And I think there's a lot of things. One, burnout. And that burnout can be emotional, social, physical, financial. it's just, it's so much that's being spent, right? And you can look at that as like financially for sure, but your energy is being spent, your social interactions, like everything is being spent, and your battery is just dead. And another aspect of that too is even looking at it in the context of your environment, right? Like when it's like November, November, like early December too, like obviously the holidays, we see like all these like lights up, we see those fairy
Yeah.
lights, and we see those streets decorated. And then as soon as the holidays done, it's like boom, back to like just like street lights and like cold darkness.
So
And
true.
so yeah, and so there's so many changes that happen literally in a span of like the month of December to early January. And then you have Blue Monday, which I think it's the third Monday of January. The date itself, I guess, always changes then. But it's when the bill comes in, you're looking at that. It's when you look at your calendar and you don't have 10,000 events to go to. Um, it's cold, it's dark, it's all these different things, and it feels very, very depressing, right? I find that, yes, as you kind of brought up with New Year's resolutions, like I think one big thing that we can maybe do is redefine that. And instead of having that, maybe have a New Year's game plan, a self care game plan. And so, what I mean by that is, we're not like psychics. We're not going to be able to predict how life is going to look like in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. But maybe for the first 2 weeks, the first 3 weeks of January, we can plan something out. So that could be, hey, it's going to be so dark outside, and I'm just going to feel like there's not enough light. Maybe it's a good time to invest in like mood lighting. It's like a light that looks like a window. It's honestly really helped, and there's a lot of studies with that one. But yeah, investing in that, investing in, having quick coffee chats or something with different friends, family, organizing that already. Maybe having people involved in this plan, and like you can help them with their plan, working on those coping mechanisms, those grounding techniques, and using that like actively. But I think the big thing is not putting pressure on yourself to like recuperate too fast, because we know that it's going to take a little bit of time to get back on our feet after the holidays. So look at what your main needs are going to look like. Write them down on a list and take some time and just give some ideas to those separate thoughts and try to make them into reality for the first couple of weeks, the first 3 weeks of January, just as we're coming down from the holidays.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Artificial window or simulated window,
Yeah, those are exactly
something
it.
like that. But I like that. That's a cool idea. I've actually not
Yeah,
heard about that until today.
yeah.
So,
Especially in
but
like spaces
ways
where
to
like,
like kind of trick the brain a little bit and help us sort of get through the
yeah,
hump. And I also really like what you said, instead of resolution, it's kind of like reflection. So, the kind of carrying the tone of what you were saying over the holidays, but even afterwards of, okay, how can we look at, what did I learn about my limits? What did I learn about myself this past year? What do I want to bring with me forward this year? What do I want to leave behind? Things like that we can be in charge of, versus the things that we're trying to be so in control of that,
yeah,
we can't be. And
right.
yeah.
Just like basically focus on that first month. Don't focus on like, okay, I'm gonna do this extreme goal and make sure it's done by the end of March or whatever it is. Think about January, think about recuperating, creating a game plan for yourself, that's going to address the concerns you're going to have post holidays, and take it step by step. I think it's the big thing.
And like, also, if you don't hit the goal that you thought you were going to, so what? Like, push it to the next quarter, or yeah, like readjust it. These are things that we want to teach the younger generation, our kids, of like, okay, you didn't do so well on that test. Let's try again, or let's find a
Um,
different way to come at it. And I think we put this weird amount of pressure on ourselves. And I think people are pushing back a lot more nowadays on that too, and not get caught up in that as well. And so, back in the day, it was the gym memberships that would be so busy in January because everyone's goal
Yeah.
always connected to weight loss. And I think
Yeah.
we've been doing a lot of work about body image over the years and not looking at it as body positivity, but, like body movement, what works for me, what's health, and that sort of thing. And so I think the same goes for these goals that we have in our mind at the end of the day. I can think of 10,000 more things that we could be doing, like how to be a good human to other humans
Agreed.
instead of
Yeah.
I need to make this money or I need to hit this target or whatever. How to practice anti-racism. There's a goal for us. There's lots
Yes.
of these
Yeah.
sorts of things that connect us on a human level that we could be challenging ourselves with more versus some of the other things that are not making us better people.
Yes,
Personally,
I
that's
totally
just my
agree.
opinion.
Yeah. No, I
you
totally
know
agree with that. And I feel like, yeah, like be authentic with yourself with these goals, right? Because you're right, like hitting the gym, like saving a bunch of money. Like these are all like very traditional goals that we've seen years and years being taught to us, like through honestly a lot of like mass media, through like our families, all that stuff, in terms of like what a New Year's resolution should look like, period. But keep it authentic to yourself. Yeah, like I love the goals that you shared as well, in terms of making a change or an impact in your own community, and in your own development. That's not seen as the traditional
yeah
way of like working on your development.
yeah
Yeah. Mhm.
So we shared a lot about tips and tricks and ideas and thoughts about what the holidays can bring for us. Why don't we, before we close, what's a holiday middle fingers up? What's something you want to put your, do a little, what do you want to put your middle fingers up to in terms of the holidays? How about I say it that way?
Yes. Honestly, I'd say the materialism part of the holidays. I feel like it creates such a huge divide between friends and family, yeah,
Yes.
coworkers, colleagues, everything. And it creates and again, there's so many other social aspects of materialism that I'm sure is like a whole podcast episode on itself.
Yeah.
But again, like the holidays is all about celebrating each other and having people to celebrate with. And that's either your own communities that you've built by yourself. It can be small, tiny communities, like one or two people, or it could be family, whatever you feel like you turn to when you think of community. That's what the holiday should be, not the materialistic parts of it.
I agree. And I think it's also breaking some of these patterns that many of our generations we kind of joined the cult of capitalism and consumerism, and the billionaires up top are laughing at all of us who have nothing in our
Like,
pockets, but feel like we have to spend, spend, spend to keep up. And I think we're doing a disservice to our kids and the younger generation when we continue to fatten them up with this idea of your value comes from that expensive item that I did or didn't buy you. And one of the things that we try to do in our home is like experience kind of gifts. So
mm,
we have less crap around that is going to be donated over time because we're going to grow out of it, and B, it's something to do with family time together, whether it's going to a concert or it's going to an outdoor thing or it's doing something together. And it doesn't have to cost a lot again as well. So I think these are things that we can all encourage ourselves with and not feel like we have to
yeah,
keep up with our friends who are buying their kids the things and stuff because they're probably feeling the same thing too. So 100% agree about, middle fingers up to these materialistic kind of expectations of what we're supposed to buy each other and all that. And like I was telling you, I was at Home Sense the other day and I could not believe what was at she told I'm outing myself. My husband's going to hear this, but like what my amount was at the till and only had a few items, and the cost of everything has gone up significantly. And I think we have to
yeah.
seriously look at that as well. It's not the way that maybe it used to be. And so again, we need to fight that a little bit. That's a piece of
Agreed.
rebellion that we can definitely throw out. So
Yeah.
anyways, Shagun, I love talking to you. I hope that we get
Guys,
you back on again. talking about guilt, talking about how to unpack some of these parts of us with compassion is something that I really, really appreciate that comes from you. And, reminding us that our bodies and our guilt and even our exhaustion, they're all trying to tell us something. And we all kind of have to figure out what that is on an individual level. And one more time, maybe you can share where people can find you if they want to connect with you.
Yeah, again, Lotus Pathways Psychotherapy. I'm on Instagram, the website, Psychology Today. So you can connect with me through those avenues. And yeah, I'd love to meet you and to get to know you as well.
I love it. And for everyone else, okay, so everyone, as we move through the holidays, hydrate, try to set those boundaries. And if all else fails, fake a bathroom break. If you have someone asking you too many personal questions, you can tell them that Shagun said that is off limits. From both of us, you got this. And remember, these conversations are door openers. We're just scratching the surface, just starting to have these kind of conversations. We need you to help contribute, send feedback, tell us what hits, what doesn't hit, so we can navigate how to have future conversations. Any last words from our guest?
Yeah, well, again, like throughout the holidays, remember, like the person that you need to show up for the most is going to be yourself. So again, like celebrate the holidays, celebrate your family, but most importantly, celebrate yourself and everything you accomplish for that year.
Well said. Thank you so much for coming on.